Welcome to the show. Should Trump derangement syndrome be included in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual? I'm going to talk about this with Eric Metaxas, star of the Eric Metaxas Show and much else besides, right here on the Patrick Coffin Show. But first, this episode brought to you by, it's a summit I've been planning for months. It took much longer than I thought, and I've marshaled about 18 top experts in the area of the pandemic from every possible angle, from the mask efficacy to the lockdown to hydroxychloroquine to depression in kids, all the side effects and so on. It's called Truth Over Fear, Unmasking COVID-19. It's happening the end of this month as you're listening now, October 30th and 31st. For more information or to register, just go to www.restoretheculture.com, restoretheculture.com. This is a bright light in a very dark year, and I don't want you to miss it. Truth Over Fear, Unmasking COVID-19. RestoreTheCulture.com is that website. Glad you're hanging out. This is going to be so much fun. In fact, more fun than canon law permits. Eric Metaxas, the star of the Eric Metaxas Show, writes like a dream, extremely dapper, courageous, bold, and has the funny gene. Eric, welcome back.
I love being with you, Patrick. Thank you for your kind words.
We'll hit rewind a little bit and talk about the difference between the American culture in 2016 and how relatively genteel we were just those 4 years ago to today with Antifa and its cousin Black Lives Matter, which is pure unalloyed Marxism. And now we know from audio that it's actually founded partly on witchcraft and communicating with the souls of the dead. This is not total, not Kansas anymore.
We don't want to cast aspersions on demonic stuff and whatever people want to do. Look, we are living in a different world because of Trump. Trump, unlike his predecessors, fights back. In the past, we've had Republicans and conservatives who have played patty cake with evil and who have allowed the nastiness and the bias of the mainstream media to continue. They haven't punched back. Trump won't stand for that. And because he has fought back, they have become unhinged. It's really very simple. If you're like a John McCain or a George W. Bush, you sort of are you're very gentle with them. Even a Mike Pence would be, there's a gentleness and unwillingness to kind of go there, as they say. Mm-hmm. Trump goes there. I think he's been heroic in doing so. I wouldn't necessarily agree with the way he's done it every time, but let me say most of the time he has been not only right on, but has had a moral courage that has been lacking dramatically in people that we would consider on our side theologically or politically. He has a tremendous moral courage. That moral courage has caused the other side to flip their wigs and to really say what they have been thinking, but maybe not saying, to go full on Marxist, to go full on angry, nasty, demonizing, name calling. You're a bigot, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe, you're a homophobe. They didn't do that before because they didn't have to. Mm-hmm. But Trump has sort of forced them to, they've been flushed out of the bushes, so to speak, and they really, really have unmasked themselves. And that's, a big part of what we today would call Trump derangement syndrome. He's driven them to it because he hasn't let them get away with some of the things that no one ought to have let them get away with, but they did.
Right. I call him magical mask removing cream. When you see and hear him, your mask just comes off. It has to come off, and your first principles come roaring forth, whether they're deranged or whether they're sane.
Well, he's a little bit like a court jester in the sense that he jokes, like he speaks truth. Some of it is hilarious, joking. But when you do that to people who don't like to hear the truth or who aren't used to being called out on what is true, you provoke dramatic reactions, and he has provoked dramatic reactions, but I think it's healthy. And what it does, Patrick, it shows us the lack of moral courage and the lack of vision and virtue that some of our heroes have had. When I heard, for example, that John Kasich and Carly Fiorina and a number of others have come out for Biden, I think to myself, how in the world did I, Eric Metaxas, think of them as people on my side? They've revealed themselves to be something else. I don't call them evil, but they don't seem to understand what is at stake. And what we have in this president is someone who understands what is at stake. When you're dealing with China, you're dealing with people who murder people so they can get $500,000 for their organs. That's what they do to Uyghur Muslims and people they call political prisoners. When you're dealing with people like that, you need to know you're dealing with people like that. You're not dealing with people who are sort of like you. You're dealing with people that will do anything because they have no moral order. They have no compunction about doing whatever they need to get power. That's the Marxist worldview. You see it on full display in China, and you see it in certain political elements in the United States today. Trump gets that, and he deals with it accordingly, and I think it's necessary, and I thank God for his ability to see it and to deal with it.
President Trump definitely talks like a man speaking to another man in a saloon. And if that other man is a bad man, he doesn't play footsie with it. He confronts it, and he triggers his enemies, and everyone else gets kind of nervous. Now, you're Eric. I've been reading you and loving your stuff for many years, and I am blowing smoke there, by the way. You're an outlier here because you're articulate. You are a public Christian conservative. You dress well. You speak well. That is the template for what I think Austin Roos. I'm so jealous he came up with this. You would easily be categorized by some as expected to be a prissy con. Like he's too venal. He's had bad marriages.
A prissy con. I actually came up with the term very recently for the evangelicals who are guilty of this. I call them devangelicals because they go to the fainting couch. Listen,
vapors.
Here's the issue. I grew up in a working class home. My parents worked hard. They were immigrants to this country. They taught me to love this country. They gave me the basic values that most Americans, I think, get when you grow up in a working class environment. I went to Yale University, which is part of the global elitist culture. And so in a sense, I get both sides. I understand the language of both sides. And so it was initially my instinct to look down on Trump, to think of him as a vulgarian. But as more time passed, the more I realized, no, he's doing what great leaders have always done. They may have been geniuses, but they were able to channel that genius to speak to the common man and common woman in a language they could understand, and to speak for them, to say to them, I see what you're dealing with. I know you. I see you. That is what most of our previous leaders have not been able to do, the cultural elites. And I think that Trump, for me, he is somebody that I understand him. I grew up in Queens, New York, by the way. Let me say that as well, not just working class, but Queens, New York. And so really, I think much of the opposition to him is a fussy kind of elitism. It's to say, if you don't play ball our way, if you don't have the kind of degrees or use the kinds of words that we use, you're out. That to me is elitism. It's fundamentally un-American and often anti-American. And that's my brief defense of why I think I understand Trump, and a lot of my confreres do not.
Well, President Trump is a crowbar, and you can't have an elegant crowbar. And he's a crowbar for both parties, you know? I mean, they use the word disruptor. I don't think you can have someone who sounds like Bishop Sheen or David Niven and gets the things done that have to be done, right?
Look,
do you like that?
Right behind me is Donald the Caveman, okay? I created this character with my friend Tim Raglan, good Catholic. Donald the Caveman, okay? Cavemen get stuff done. They're not polite. They don't know which fork to use, but they get stuff done. They're good guys, you know, or at least this one is a good guy. And so I wrote these 3 books about Donald the Caveman as a means to communicate, not just to kids, but to adults who get the adult humor. What is happening in the country? Why does the swamp hate his guts so much? Because he says, hey, what do you mean we can't drain the swamp? Let's drain it. Come on, let's go drain the swamp. Everybody's like, no, you can't do that. It's like when they said to Reagan, you can't say, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Don't you understand, you fool, you actor? You can't say that. And he said, oh, no, I can say it. I will say it. And he said it. And the demons trembled. When someone like that speaks, the demons tremble, because we're talking about somebody who is willing to speak the truth, come what may. And this is a man who, Trump, doesn't care what they say in Foggy Bottom, doesn't care what General Mattis tells him. He says, I'm the president. The people, by the way, elected me. And who elected me? The base? No, not the base. The American people. All of the American people we chose him. And every leader, whether it's Colin Powell or Carly Fiorina, they all ought to respect that. And somehow, I think some of them, they really are very much a part of this swamp, part of this establishment that is, it doesn't have any ideology except power at the end of the day. If you challenge their power, as Trump has done, you're sort of, you're messing with the system. So sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I'm going to be linking at patrickcoffin.media to Donald the Caveman Drains the Swamp, Donald and the Fake News, and Donald Builds the Wall with Tim Ragland. I know that it's sort of like watching Bugs Bunny. It's for kids, but adults go, I see what he did there. So this works on intergenerational humor.
And by the way, I got to say, Patrick, I feel like one of the things about our side, about the conservative side, about the Christian side, we tend not to create culture. We let the left typically create culture. Yes. And in writing these Donald the Caveman books, Donald Drains the Swamp, Donald Builds the Wall, and Donald and the Fake News, I have basically, I've said we've got to create culture, something where we can laugh, where we can enjoy what is happening, and where we can make fun of the other side. The other side has used humor to make fun of us, whether it's on SNL or wherever you look. I mean, it's always the conservatives that are being lampooned. I think it's very, very important that we use the language of the culture, which is humor, to point out the foibles of the other side. So it's why I've written these books. It's why I do a lot of what I do. Our side needs to understand that it's okay for us to use humor. We ought to use humor.
My spiritual father is Archbishop Sheen, and he used to talk about the Christian worldview is it's transparent. We see the other world. Materialism and atheism, this is why we call people dense when they don't get jokes. They're dense with materialism. They don't have an end of the story as we do. And I find it a perpetual source of frustration that there are far fewer, too few, I should say, conservative comedians, people who are willing to stand up and have a couple of yucks from the other perspective. And now comedians are facing this awful cancel culture. Even Jerry Seinfeld, right, living icon, he will not go near a college campus because, quote, nothing's funny anymore.
Yeah.
And so when you remove the court jester, the fool, if you will, who's almost like a spigot pressure releaser, we need to laugh about things.
It's healthy. It's healthy. And I think, it's one of the reasons that I go out of my way to use humor. I mean, it comes very naturally to me, but I don't edit it out because I think we need to be able to use that language. It is the language of the culture. It's how we communicate fairly often. And I think that if you're only serious, when you see people on, news programs or whatever, they're always serious. And I think the left has often used humor, whether it's on the late night shows or on weekend shows, to make fun of usually conservatives or Christians. And I think that, it's fair game to do both. So as I say, the Donald, the Caveman books, it's my first, foray into that world. But I thought our side needs something to celebrate what is happening and to laugh at the other side. And there's a lot to laugh at.
100%. We're always playing catch up. We're always on defense. So I'm not sure who said it, but he who controls the narrative controls the culture. We're all one big story, right? So why are we giving narration duties? Why is it always, nominations are always from one direction? So
that's bravo. Part of, I've also said recently that I really do think that for some reason, I get this impression from a lot of conservatives and from a lot of Christians that they don't believe what they say they believe strongly enough to be courageous about it. In other words, I have more recently said, hey, you know what? Socialism is evil. And if you care about the poor, you actually care about the poor, how dare you dream of voting for somebody who flirts with socialism?
Mm-hmm.
You care about Black lives? How could you dream at this point, with the evidence we have today, of voting for a Democratic candidate? Their policies have now been proven over 5 decades. Now we have the evidence. We can't say we didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence is that Democratic policies have destroyed Black communities, have absolutely destroyed Black families. If you really care about Black lives, you really care about the urban underclass, how could you even dream of voting for Joe Biden? I mean, we need to put it to them that the facts are in. It's not 1968. It's not 1980. We have reams of data that show that Democratic policies have gutted inner cities. And what we've seen with the violence all across this country, where's that happening? It's happening in Democratic-led cities.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they don't have the courage to stand up against this. They've always been in bed with the rioters. They've always sort of acted like who was it? Was it the mayor of Seattle or some, I can't remember, or Portland, where he, this kind of hip young guy, he goes out to the protesters to kind of, he's going to go play hacky sack with them or whatever he's going to do. And then they basically, drown him out with booze, and he runs away with his tail between his legs. And that's basically what happens. If you want to play patty cake with the devil, you're going to find out that he's not your friend.
Yeah, it's almost like the left hate liberals more than they hate conservatives.
Well, I mean, I think that there's great health to some extent in what we see happening in the country. Your average American, when they see political leaders allow that kind of really scary violence to go on,
mm-hmm.
they make a note and they say, you know what, that's not okay. I may have voted for Democrats in the past, but how is it possible that they're allowing businesses to be destroyed, billions of dollars of property to be destroyed? We have a police force. We pay high taxes. What is happening? I mean, I think, your average American is noticing this, and they may be quiet about it, but it's going to be reflected in the polling booth.
A high contrast, I think, to what you're saying is the vice presidential debate, the first one with Kamala Harris and Vice President Pence. Two, in a way, great snapshots of the two cultures that they represent. Mike Pence sounded like calm, like an adult, rational, patient. Kamala Harris with her fake Hillary-esque cackle. I thought any minute now she's going to bite the head off a whippet or something for no particular reason. Not answering questions. I was delighted to just have her unspool. I just find Mike Pence masterful. I mean, to be able to be that self-controlled, he gets very, very high marks because, Kamala Harris was spreading a number of outrageous lies. And I think it's natural for us to get very angry instantly, to get inflamed when we hear those kinds of lies, because they're so ugly. Yeah. But
he managed rather miraculously, I thought, by the power of the Holy Spirit, to manifest self-control. And it was kind of like you were saying, there's an adult, there's a mature person, there's someone I'd be happy if he had to become president. God forbid something happens to the president. Whereas with Kamala Harris, you get the impression that this is somebody who is, literally the most liberal senator in the Senate. Out of 100 senators, she is to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Yep.
She does not have the temperament. She does not have the voting record to represent America fairly. And I think a lot of people saw that. At least I hope so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she scores higher on the intersectional Olympic scoreboard. And I wondered what magical powers you'd have to rebrand yourself as Indian American in 2016 to African American in 2020. And would it even be possible to try the reverse? And why would you do that?
Well, isn't this the absurdity of where we are? I mean, she's married to a white guy. She's lighter skinned than I am in August. Like, how ridiculous that this is the kind of thing that we're talking about now in our political life. We had a black president for 2 terms it's as if we've gone backwards. And again, I think your average American sees that. I mean, most of the blacks that I'm friends with, they don't know what to make of this. They don't take it seriously. And it's a very, very fringy kind of Marxist, loud group that has taken control of the narrative. And I really think that, I'm thrilled for folks like whether it's Kanye West or Candace Owens or down the line, Brandon Tatum, who are being very vocal about saying this does not represent us. And I think Trump will probably get more percentage of the black vote than any Republican candidate ever. I would be disappointed if that didn't happen. It looks like that's going to happen.
I think you're right. I've had Bevelyn Beatty on my show, who famously put the splashdown with black paint on the Black Lives Matter graffiti in front of the Trump Tower. And she calls President Trump the first black president for the reasons you just deduced.
It's kind of, I had her on this program as well. And I think that we need more voices like that, people who are really willing to speak up bravely and loudly, because we're facing cultural Marxism. It is very dark. I don't need to tell you, but it is extremely dark stuff. This is the stuff that destroys every good thing. It is the enemy of God. It is the enemy of God's order. The Black Lives Matter website. I mean, all the stuff they put on there is stuff that blacks don't care about, right? You know, that they put stuff on there. It's all cultural Marxism. And they somehow cynically claim to represent blacks. Well, most blacks I know are religious. They go to church. And that is that's where we are. So we need leadership, and God is providing some new leaders. So yeah, I'm pretty excited.
Eric, I want to ask you about the Fred Rogersification of Jesus Christ in so many churches, Catholics and Protestants. Being a Christian, if you're a man, has been rebranded slowly. I don't know if it started in the 60s. Maybe it started with Norman Vincent Peale even earlier. But a Christian man is basically a nice guy, terrified of conflict, wouldn't hurt a flea. That's pretty distant from what's that?
It's Ned Flanders on The Simpsons.
Ned Flanders, yeah.
Look, it's not like there's not something to that, right? I mean, Mike Pence is a classic example. The man is an amazing gentleman, and I think that that's very important. But it doesn't mean that we're not also to be warriors. We know that Jesus turned over the tables. That is an act of violence. That is not a mild-mannered man to flip over tables that were not his tables. I think that side of the faith has been misunderstood, because let's face it, since the 60s, with the Cultural Revolution, we've had every kind of perversion, in a sense, of the normal order, right? And so women have become masculine, men have been pushed to become feminine or feminized. This is not God's order. And the idea that to be a Christian is to be nice, David, maybe David wasn't a Christian, but he's a Christian hero, okay? He was chosen by God. When he killed Goliath, he didn't say, oh gosh, what was I thinking? I apologize. I need to sit down with Goliath's family and apologize. No, he cut off the head and he carried it a great distance. I mean, that's David. We cheer David. Now, that doesn't mean that I need to be swinging a sling, down on Fifth Avenue or cutting people's heads off. But the point is that what a man is something that really has been deeply misunderstood since the 60s. And I think that if you want to have a healthy culture, men have to be men, women have to be women. We have to be proud to be who God made us to be. And yeah, the idea that we're supposed to be nice, we're supposed to avoid conflict, I simply think that's theologically wrong. I mean, I think when you talk about turning the other cheek, there's a defiance in that when you turn the other cheek, right? Yeah. There's a defiance that I will turn the other cheek. I'm gonna show you I'm bigger than you are. I can take another punch. That's a whole different thing than being a nice guy. And a lot of I've seen it in the evangelical church where people are so averse to conflict, and you think, well, if you're too averse to conflict, you will enable evil to triumph. And that is what has been happening among a lot of Republicans, and certainly among a lot of church leaders. They have not had the guts to fight. They've been unwilling to look unpopular, and they have allowed evil to triumph, and shame on them.
Thinking about Luke chapter 22, verse 36, where Jesus basically tells his apostles to carry, right? Buy a sword. Sell your cloak, buy a sword. And the sword's not going to be used for cutting.
Is that only in the Catholic Bible?
No.
I mean, can you imagine? It's in the Bible. What you just said is in the Bible. When do we ever hear that quoted? Thank you, Patrick Coffin, for quoting that, because you think that can't be right. That can't be in the earliest manuscripts. Oh, yes, it can.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wasn't used for slicing butter on scones at 4 p.m. A few minutes left, Eric. I want to respect your time. I want to ask you about fatherhood. It seems to me, now this is anecdotal, it's far from scientific, but just talking with friends, colleagues, listeners, the people who, back to Trump derangement syndrome, the people who don't really dislike President Trump, but loathe him. He occupies rent-free space in their minds all day and all night. They post on him. Everything revolves back to Trump somehow.
Yeah.
A lot of those people, almost to a man, in my, again, anecdotal experience, have daddy issues. Trump triggers something there.
Can I use the word daddy issues, and you beat me to it.
Yeah.
There's something to that. I don't have daddy issues. I love my dad to death. I adore him, and we can only speculate, Patrick. We can only speculate, but we also have to understand there's something spiritual here. He represents a kind of manhood that has been lacking, and that, whether it's a Jezebelic spirit in our culture, but there has been something deeply out of order, spiritually speaking. I'm not talking about politically speaking. Politically is the second part, but spiritually speaking, there's been something out of order, and to be a man's man, and to be strong, and to be a bit of a caveman. Those are the kinds of things that when you embody that, you are at war with the spirit of the age. And we know that the spirit of the age is always at war with God. Mm-hmm. The zeitgeist is always at war with the spirit of God. But I really do think that somehow the unbridled manliness of Trump's style is very, very offensive to some people. They equate manhood with toxic masculinity. They don't have a biblical view of manhood. Yeah. They have a fallen view of manhood, and it plays into that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the fatherlessness in America, particularly in the Black community, and how that rage that can develop when you don't have a dad or one who's abusive, and just watching the street violence and the unfiltered, naked rage that so many young men have. It reminds me of the devil. The devil has a father wound, and he wants us to.
Deep. We can't end on that. We've got to do another program soon, and just start with that part there.
Look at the time. We got to go. Yeah, and he wants us to join in his father wound. He wants constant the rage machine we see, and not just on alternative crazies like the Daily Beast, but on mainstream media every day and every night.
Well, look, rage is fundamentally immature. Let's be honest. Rage, that kind of shrieking rage that we saw when Kavanaugh, became justice of the Supreme Court, a keening, shrieking, shrill rage that has no bottom. That's sick. And, we need to understand adults who are experiencing that. They need to figure out how to get that solved, because that is not good behavior.
Thy lips to God's ears. Before I say goodbye, Eric, I want to thank you and just mention the website again, restoretheculture.com. Here's a sample of presenters: Dr. Simone Gold and child psychiatrist Dr. Mark McDonald from America's Frontline Doctors, a German attorney who will knock your socks off named Dr. Rainer Fulmich, Dr. Jay Richards of the Discovery Institute, Matthias Kilstead of Sweden, and why the non-lockdown in Sweden works so well with this pandemic, Michael Fumento, Dr. Dolores Cahill of UC Dublin University. Fantastic lineup. I can't wait to get this off the ground. It's going to be the last 2 days of this month, Friday, October 30th, Saturday, October 31st. That's partly chosen because California's LA and Ventura counties have banned trick-or-treating. That's right, folks. So we're sticking it to it, baptizing that whole weekend. restoretheculture.com. Eric Metaxas, thanks for being magnificent. I always learn a ton, and let's do it again.
Anytime, Patrick, and I mean that. God bless you.
All right, God bless you. This is the Patrick Coffin Show. Be a saint. What else is there?
Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.